Hi there and welcome to episode 151 of the ADHD Adults podcast. I'm James Brown, the man who's obsessed with pointless podcast metrics. And I'm sadly joined, as usual, by Dr. Alex Connor, the man who definitely doesn't feel compelled to do anything nefarious within certain wooded areas, and Mrs. ADHD, who I couldn't think of a joke for, but she'd probably have interrupted me if I had. Alex, hi.
Oh, CD. That's not really a laughing matter. This is a tricky one.
I don't think any of your hellos are a laughing matter, to be fair. And Sam, hi.
Hi.
Good. How are you both, Mrs. ADHD first?
Tired, stressed, all the things. How about you?
No. And Alex, I suppose I should ask again, begrudgingly, even though I'm not going to listen.
I'm excellent. Thank you, James. One of our listeners wrote to me to say that when I say I'm excellent in such a positive way and it annoys you so much, that's their favourite bit.
Damn it.
150 episodes of ridiculous listener numbers, according to Tarquin, the intern's metric, one of whom sent us a letter. Would you believe that?
No, I wouldn't.
That's right, James. It's from I'll just check. It's from a Robert from Kidderminster. It says,
what?
I know. It says, I'm back in the right order now and listen, sort of, to your episode on workplace discrimination. Did you know that they've even bullied me in heaven about James saying bullying in the worst place? It goes on to say, are we saying there's a heaven now in these weird letters? I thought they were left in a box or something. That's a good point, Robert, actually. I'll check that.
It's very
We've had a real letter, which... And it is very clear that this one was chosen by James. It's from an Ali D, and it says, hi, from New South Wales, Australia, where the heat and flies are sending my sensory problems into a tornado spiral. I wanted to say that almost everything James says, I feel I can relate with mental health, even down to suicidal ideation. Thanks to James being open and honest, I managed to gain courage to ask my psychiatrist and psychologist for an autism assessment. And because I still feel there's a massive piece of the puzzle missing, and I'm booked in for January. Also, Alex and Sam, I love you guys, and always give me a laugh. Feels very secondary, Sam, doesn't it? I've had it.
Yeah.
I don't mind
always
that.
give me a
I
laugh.
like it.
But James is my favourite. The podcast is the highlight of my week, and can say it played a big part in saving my life. Wow, thank you, Ali.
Oh.
And knowing it's the world that's crazy, not us neurodivergents. I mean, it's probably both. Yes, a little talk on Australia is long overdue. Thank you so much.
Oh.
I mean,
loved it.
I think of all the letters we've had in terms of the erudite nature, the accuracy, the way in which it reflects the reality of the podcast. This is clearly the best.
It's a mood.
Clearly the best one. What I will say is that doing a little talk for those in Australasia, because it means you've got to start at 7 a.m, an online workshop. But yeah, we know we love
there. That'll be like, is that 7 p.m. there? Or
6 in the evening? Yeah, 6 in the evening. But some of our listeners clearly have taste, Alex.
Yeah, true. Thanks, Ali D. Nice to be sort of included. No, I can't even joke about it. It's a lovely letter and we adored it. Thank you. And as usual, Tarquin, the Metrics Intern, whilst golfing with Sam's dad, has given me some information about another city we have listeners in. It's Birmingham in the UK. The Metrics Intern has told us a fact about Birmingham. For those that may not know, Birmingham has its own time zone known as BMT, Birmingham Mean Time, which is 18 minutes and 7 seconds behind the rest of the UK. Interesting. Cheers, Tarquin.
I'm not responding because I know that's not true. I live in Birmingham and we don't have a separate time zone. I wish we did.
Everyone else is ahead of you by 18 minutes.
Because I'd like access to a few hours that nobody else has got access to, ideally, every day.
Not how
so I can get more done.
You know, time zones isn't extra time. It's just...
Well, what if you're a fly, though?
Oh, God. Anyway, as usual, this company called Heatco Midlands Limited, I don't know, Google them, give them some shit, who installed a water tank illegally and won't fix it because statute of limitations of a podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts. We choose a theme. Last time around was about ADHD and prioritization, I think. And this episode, in this episode, we're covering ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Thanks to Wesley and others for suggesting the topic. As usual, The 3 parts include the Dappy from N-Dubs of Evidence, Alex the Psycho,
I know who that is.
Education Monkey,
Hello.
talking about a theme, our personal reflections on OCD. It's the wrong thing in the script. And then finally, we'll give you some tips, just the tips, spunk trumpeting, Gabby Loganing, etc. So, Alex, something bore people, something education.
Thanks, James. Just a quick aside that we hear a lot of jokes in inverted commas about OCD, with OCD as the target of the joke, and they usually mean people that straighten fucking pictures or something, whereas it's a really genuinely critical mental health condition, and we're not going to be doing those jokes, even though they write themselves, don't they? It's stupid and cheap. Right, obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, is a mental health condition characterized by recurring, unwanted, and intrusive thoughts, images, also urges. These are obsessions, they're the initial thoughts. And that leads to repetitive behaviors or mental acts. So it can be actions or other thoughts that are led to by those. And they're the compulsions, the C of OCD. And they're aimed at reducing the distress or preventing a feared event or situation caused by those thoughts that are the obsessions, the O. So, to put it simply, the main symptoms of OCD are the unpleasant thoughts and repetitive behaviors that one, James, can't control. Doing the grammar thing again because it makes me laugh. I know that's a bit of a science blare, but quick recap. OCD, the O is for obsessions, and these are those thoughts, the unwanted thoughts, and the C is the compulsions, and these are behaviors, but that can also include thoughts, annoyingly. But they're thoughts or behaviors you've effectively chosen to deal with those obsessions, those obsessive thoughts. The compulsions are because of the obsessions in OCD. That's really important. Compulsions with no obsession behind them. That's something else. It isn't unheard of for some people with OCD to have sort of forgotten what the obsession was in the first place and still have but they all have to have started with that. It's a really shitty, nasty disorder. It really is. So some common examples, not exhaustive, of obsessions in OCD might be fears of contamination of food or whatever, or fears of harm coming to oneself or others, James, oneself, fear of crowds, presumably bearing garlic and pitchforks, James, a need for symmetry or exactness. And the compulsions often involve repetitive actions, like washing or checking or counting or arranging. Or they can be sort of mental rituals like repeating phrases or prayers or anything else, really. And these thoughts and behaviors often follow a 4-step pattern, boring list, alert. 1 is the obsession, intrusive, distressing thoughts, urges, repeatedly entering your mind, unwanted. 2 is the anxiety, and that's the feeling that the obsession provokes, intense anxiety or distress. C, perfect, is the compulsion. These repetitive behaviors or mental acts that you feel you have to do as a result of the anxiety and the distress caused by that obsession. And then 4 is temporary relief. That behavior or action or thought brings a temporary relief, but the obsession, anxiety return at some point later on. Rinse and repeat. Horrible. These obsessions and compulsions can interfere so much with people's daily lives. It causes distress, impairs their ability to function normally. Amazing.
How come? So I'm so sorry. I'm so lost in my own thoughts on this.
What were you thinking about? Is more interesting than any script-based question.
I was just thinking, shit, have I got some of this? Anyway, how common is it? It seems more well known than ADHD.
Yeah, it's an excellent and professionally asked question, Sam, as always. Yeah. So the prevalence estimates, if you look in the papers, it's variable, but loosely speaking, high, probably about 1 to 4% of the population at some point in that person's lifetime. So similar numbers to ADHD. The exact cause of it, not known. There's loads of regions of the brain that have been implicated. Definitely a genetic factor. Other risk factors again. Trigger warning if you like those sorts of klaxons. I don't like them. But history of child abuse, serious stress-inducing events have been linked. This isn't good science, but it's all we've got at the moment. And it can, unlike ADHD, it can appear in adults as well as appearing in children. And there are differences in the age of onset, on average, between males and females. So about just short of 10 years old for male children and about 11 years old for female children, it first appears, apparently, and 21 years old for men and 24 years old for women.
Wow. And how is it treated?
Yeah, I mean, there are treatments. We don't usually say that, apart from for ADHD in mental health world. There are a variety of treatments, psychotherapy, usually CBT or CBT similar, exposure and response prevention type therapies. There are medications that have been shown to help a bit, antidepressants, and in extreme cases, they've tried surgical procedures, deep brain stimulation, even psychosurgery. That therapy, the exposure and response prevention, is effective in about 2/3 of people that they treat, but it can sometimes take years to treat OCD effectively if it works at all. Yes, James.
The bit, the thing.
Just now, Bob. We'll get to it. All right. Well, ADHD and OCD, I love doing those letters, are not mutually exclusive. And people have said they do. I did a very Trumpian thing then because I've said they do in the past wrongly. And I'm trying wildly to row that shit back. Science. I read some sites that said that. And then when I checked further and spoke to people, I was wrong.
It's hard to say.
Yeah. They're not mutually exclusive, ADHD and OCD. They do sometimes coexist. A study reported a prevalence rate of 11.8% for comorbid ADHD when they looked at people with OCD. So that's a specific group, of course. Obviously, there isn't a lot of research in adults. Please fund it. Study in children found OCD patients showed a prevalence of 25.5% for comorbid ADHD, much higher. However, the majority of that comorbidity appears after the onset of ADHD. Remember, ADHD always, by its very diagnosis, has to appear in children. Why is that comorbidity there? I hear you ask, and why does it appear after the onset? If you look at a list of the areas of the brain involved in OCD, you're not going to be surprised. It almost perfectly matches the list of areas of the brain implicated in ADHD. So executive functions, the forebrain at the right ear behind the eye, it's the pesky inhibition and working memory skills seems to be impacted by both.
Do they affect each other?
You see, James, it's not that hard, is it? It's a simple question. 4 words. Why can't you simply ask a sensible
He
question?
wrote all of this. We're just reading it.
151. Episode. Excellent question, Sam, as always. So the research suggests, I always say that because we're scared of I honestly get shouted at, you, James, online for the research saying stuff, and people are like, you're being offensive. And I'm like, I'm not. It's not. I didn't even do the research. It happens all the time. So the research suggests, not me, that patients experience more disabling OCD symptoms when they also have ADHD. But the actual nature of those OCD symptoms are pretty much the same as if you only have OCD. There's mixed evidence around ADHD meds and OCD. Some studies say stimulants can exacerbate the symptoms of OCD or provoke them. But also some people say treating ADHD with symptoms improves that comorbid OCD symptoms. And I suspect, like with anxiety, it could depend on the individual. Treating one without the other leads to poorer outcomes in both. And treating both simultaneously is associated with actually measurably better outcomes. And that's kind of the key here.
That last bit, I think, was important. So we, in general, Alex, in particular, obviously shit at explaining the complexity of OCD in 10 minutes. But if you're interested in finding out more, the people at ocduk.org do it much better. They do it brilliantly.
Yeah, great website.
So you can always just read that and then not listen to the rest of the podcast if you want. And in that spirit, we'll take a break and be back in part 2. See you in a bit.
Bye.
No.
Yeah.
Alex, hi.
What's up? Hello, Governor.
Welcome back to episode 151 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we are talking about ADHD and OCD. This is our personal reflections on the theme. James, go.
And what is that theme, Sam? It appears to say stress in the script, James.
Yeah.
I'm not doing well with scripting elements in terms of the first diagnostic criteria of ADHD of making careless mistakes or lacking attention to detail. Right, I do not have OCD. I actually don't think. No, I know one person who has OCD. OCD is a friend of a family member of Sam's, and therefore I can't speak from my lived experience of having it. What I know is from the research and actually from that really interesting documentary, How to Change Your Mind on Psychedelics, which I thought was fascinating. You said, Al, in the first bit about it can take years to treat OCD, and it really can. In some cases, a decade of different therapies, etc. And what I found fascinating about that documentary was guided therapy using, I think it was psilocybin, I can't remember. And in 2 sessions, the guy they had on that documentary who couldn't pick his child up because of his OCD was walking down the in the park or something and had one of the obsessions, but before the compulsion thought, no, why would I do that? It's stupid.
Doesn't
and
make
just
sense.
didn't and just didn't do it, and in 2 sessions had managed what some people take years to achieve. And I think that again it just points to the fact that the 50 years of ignoring the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics in psychiatry because of the war on drugs is the impact of that's been massive. There's one thing I do that I've mentioned before, that it is a compulsion but not an obsession, and whether this is part of just being neurodivergent, and that's the weird writing with my finger thing. I go through periods of time where everything that I say or think I also write in the air with my finger. If anyone's watched the Netflix program Boy Swallows Universe, a bit like the mute brother in that, I'll write as I'm saying, I'll be writing the words out, and I can't stop this. And it gives the act gives me anxiety, but it's not based on an obsession, and I don't think anything bad will happen. It's just I can't stop myself from doing it, and I don't know whether that. I did look it up, and I found one paper that found one article on a website that said this is something that some people report. So I haven't got anything that's personal about me. I've seen in the one person that I know the impact it can have, and I know from reading the literature the impact it can have is profound. And what you said, Alex, about it being a joke, a little bit like the public perception of autism being that everyone is either Rain Man, or that young lad that could draw the Houses of Parliament, and everyone with ADHD is a young schoolboy running around being kind of behaviorally challenging. And the public image of OCD is the person that switches the lights on and off 3 times or makes sure their tins are lined up.
Sam's face when you just said the young man, I could see her thinking, I really want to see that picture. I could see it. Houses of Parliament.
I think his name was Stephen something, wasn't it? But he still, years later, I saw still incredibly talented. Basically, Sam, he could look at the Houses of Parliament and then go away and draw it perfectly, recreate it perfectly with a pencil. But we're not
talking about autism, but no one's got a photographic memory. That's a sort of a myth in the stories. But the reason why some people who are autistic can do that is because of their autism, they're not necessarily paying attention to faces or expressions or the really strange social rules that we don't need. Instead, they can use that memory gap to do something more empirical, and it can be incredibly valuable in society, especially in science. I know that's not what we're doing. It's just cool.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we move on to Mrs. ADHD? Sam, do you have any personal reflections on OCD?
I have lots of things that I have to do a certain way in order for me to feel all right. But I don't think I think it's just my autism. I don't think it's OCD. But it's really, really hard to tell, because when you were reading all that out, I was like, oh God, a lot of this does sound like things that I have to do. But I don't. If I'm really stressed, I will do repetitive things like checking door handles a number of times and things like that. But not all the time. And I remember actually my best friend is a therapist, and I started this thing where I had to have a doll. I don't know if you remember this, James, but it was up on the wardrobe and it had to be watching me while I slept. Otherwise, I didn't feel like I'd be safe. And I told this to my friend, and she went, "You need to stop that now." And I said, "Why?" She went, "Because that will turn into, you'll make it so that you won't be able to sleep unless you've got that doll there. You need to know that you are okay sleeping without the doll looking at you." And I was like, "But I don't know if I am." And I was really scared about not having the doll looking at me when I slept, but she encouraged me to stop it, and I stopped it. But that made me think, God, do I have some tendencies that could be? Because she was saying that could be kind of going into the realms of OCD where you feel you have to do certain things, otherwise bad things will happen. But yeah, I don't think I am. I don't think I do repetitive things, and that was the thing that, unless I'm really stressed, then I do. I'm waffly.
Can I ask a couple of questions? So, just from
Yeah.
a psychological perspective, that doll thing could also be that the autism connection to inanimate objects. So you were feeling protected by something inanimate, which isn't OCD. It's real. If that inanimate thing
Right.
is real to you, then that's a rational link.
Well, I didn't think it would protect me, but I thought
Just
bad things would happen if it wasn't
okay, yeah,
looking
no,
at me.
it's famously difficult to separate sometimes
Yeah.
autism,
Yeah.
OCD, and anxiety. Um,
Yeah.
checking doors and thinking you've left the iron on and going back and checking I mean, of course it could be OCD, but it's famously also connected to stress and
ADHD.
ADHD. Part of it, and it is woolly, depends on what the consequence is. If the consequence is your house burns down, actually that's not unrealistic, is it? It's not unreasonable. You just don't know. You've forgotten.
Yeah.
And you're anxious about it, or you think, yeah,
Yes.
there's only a 0.1% chance because I know I checked it. Maybe I wasn't paying attention because that's not OCD. That's anxiety
Yeah.
or something
This was
else.
a big thing actually when I was a child. It was a nightmare for me leaving the house, not only because I was leaving the house and I didn't like going to different places, but
Yeah.
also we would be driving and I would be hysterical apparently because I'd be saying, "I think you've left the iron on and the house is going to burn down. And what if we've left the door open?" And I would be panicking about everything. And it took me a long, long time and sitting in the back of the car thinking, "Okay, think about this. If the house burns down, we've got insurance. The cat will be able to get out. That will be
Yes.
fine."
So these are
And talking through it
reasonable.
all.
Yeah. They're not helpful and they're over strong. They're catastrophes, but they are connected. There is a logic to them, which isn't the
Yeah,
same, I think.
exactly. James.
Shall I pop out for a bit?
Oh God, I would love that.
Anyway,
Sorry.
Alex, yeah, no, carry on, Sam. I shouldn't be
You know
saying
two
anything
people,
on this
actually.
part. I'm going to go and
One of
make
my
a cup
very
of tea
best
because this is
friends.
going to carry on for a bit without me. So I'll see you in a bit.
I was just about to move to him for his reflections.
He's already done them. Thanks for listening.
But yeah, I think it can look really similar to autism because I have to do things in a specific way, in a specific order, in
Yeah.
order for me to feel okay. But I think that is just because I'm autistic and I have routines, restrictive routines that are built into my day to make me feel safe. And if I don't do those things in a certain way, then my day's not right.
I really suspect a lot of people with OCD may have been misdiagnosed or they're
Yeah,
comorbid or something else, because I think that's a really common thing. He actually has gone, hasn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
He won't make the tea.
He
One of my
might start making it, but we won't
Yeah,
finish.
he won't finish it. One of my very best friends in the world, and I don't have many, has OCD, and if you know my struggles with sobriety, it's fairly obvious that half, maybe even more, of the people with alcoholism or alcohol use disorder, as I much prefer the term, have ADHD, and it's self-medication. Of those that don't, a significant proportion are probably self-medicating for OCD because alcohol is a neural depressant that can control those symptoms in a truly unhealthy way, which is really difficult. And speaking to this friend and a lot of other people, it's so obvious what OCD is and what it isn't. For example, what I'm describing and what James describes definitely isn't.
Mm.
So there's Tourette's, isn't there, which is those uncontrolled repetitive behaviors, and there's ADHD and autistic stims and tics that we have. OCD is generally different. So I have repetitive behaviors, as do you, like stims.
Yeah.
They're not conscious as such. I don't have that pressure buildup that you sometimes describe when I'm touching my face or picking my nose, or all the stims and tics I have, clicking pens and all those. The impulse is strong, but nothing bad will happen. As soon as I notice, I'm like, oh, that was just physical. It was just a physical stim. Nothing bad will happen. I don't know I'm doing it. I'm hyperkinetic. I'm wiggly wobbly. Or I get reward from it, face touching. So there's no persistent and uncontrollable thought that it controls at all. And that's differently. Even the intrusive thoughts that a lot of people with ADHD say they have, including me, they're not consistent. They're not persistent. I can get rid of them. I'm like, oh, it's bloody that thought again. You know, usually with me, it's defending myself against attack from my wife, who hasn't attacked me in 16 years. You know, but it's amusing. I don't have to do anything to get rid of it. I just don't do it, and that's why it's such a big difference, I think, between ADHD and OCD. If it was OCD, I wouldn't be able to control it like that. So when I check, I've left the lights on, locked the door. There are consequences. Someone could steal my woodpecker collection. It's not a disorder. It's very likely. This is a prized woodpecker collection. My very good friend that you also know, James, says they had to do a positive thought or something bad would happen when they were doing an unconnected, let's say making a calendar entry to meet someone. They'd have to have a positive thought, and if the wrong thought happened, they'd have to do it again and again and again, or something bad would happen to that person when they knew intellectually it wouldn't. Worrying that you've left the fire on is a worry that your house will burn down, not that, you know, something bad's going to happen to my dad or something. That is debilitating and different. James, there's no time for the game. Am I right? It says that.
I don't know. Are we done? Are we done with that bit?
Yeah. How's the TV calling back?
We have got time for the game, and you're 6-3 up. So I'm managing to claw back some points. So this is going to sound like one we've done before, but obviously I've got ADHD, and therefore I do make the same mistakes throughout my life. It's very simple. This time it's not my remarkable stylus; it's my Apple Pencil. So. And I use an iPad for making my coaching notes, and I couldn't use my Apple Pencil immediately before a session of coaching, which was frustrating and unprofessional. And there's 3 possible reasons for me not being able to use my Apple Pencil. Firstly, I'd thrown it in the bin. Secondly, I'd ordered some new nibs that you screw into the end to use, thinking they'd be delivered in time, and they weren't, but I'd thrown the old one away. So I'd taken it off and thrown it away, even though it was partially functional. And 3, because we're going down to London to do a talk this week, I'd already put it for some reason, but not my iPad, in my go bag, which I've now got the case to go away and do talks. So I threw it in the bin. I'd thrown away the nib, or I'd packed it away in a case.
Right. I think that because your bin, you have to wave at it so it opens. And because you're Dracula, it doesn't recognize you like a mirror. So it can't be that one. I don't think you bought new nibs because you only ever go on Draculas.com. It's your only website. So I think you packed it away. That's what I think.
Yeah, you're wrong. 6-4, clawing it back. I literally threw it in the bin next to me immediately after finishing a session.
Different bin, isn't it?
Threw it in the bin and then looked everywhere and thought, you know what, I better check the bin. And yeah, there it was, just in the bin.
Amazing.
Ridiculous.
Look at you with all your Apple products.
I know. Sponsored by the Big Apple. Anyway, on that happy note, we'll take a break and we'll be back in part 3 for just the tip. See you in a bit.
Bye.
Welcome back to episode 151 of the ADHD Adults podcast. We're talking about ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. As always, in part 3, just the tip. We're giving our top tips for a thing we haven't got. This one could be utterly pointless. Who should we start with? Shall we start with you, James? Any thoughts on OCD and or ADHD?
I've got thoughts. I think it's the same as that it would be for any kind of unspecified mental health or specified mental health condition or disorder, and that is used to help us out there. What I don't know, and genuinely would like to know, and please anybody let us know, how good is the support for OCD? Because we know that mental health services in the UK by the NHS is massively under-resourced. Even if you don't look at ADHD, and if you look at anything other than kind of fundamental depression, dysthymia, as opposed to major depressive disorder, where your GP will give you an antidepressant, and anxiety, you'll just be given that level of treatment. And if that's not effective, then that can be taken down a different route. But I genuinely don't know how well we support OCD in the UK or elsewhere. But if you are offered, help, first of all, reaching out for that help is important, and use what's out there. There's evidence that, I think Alex mentioned it in the psychoeducation, that exposure and response kind of prevention therapy can be really effective. But if that's something that's not available to you, or you have to pay for, again, there are barriers to care, to getting where you want to go. There is, again, some evidence that a structured daily routine can provide a sense of control, and that can reduce anxiety, that can trigger OCD symptoms, the obsessive thoughts. And writing down your thoughts, your feelings, and what the triggers are, again, can help you understand any patterns and progress. And the last thing, and this is normally something that Alex says, and I haven't stolen it off him, and it's not because people often write and say, I loved what Alex said about this, for example. But self-compassion is important. We all often kind of hate ourselves for doing things we can't stop. When I do that finger writing thing, which isn't OCD, but is something I am kind of compelled to do, I hate myself for doing it. I think I'm super weird. I think there's something wrong with me. I actually, years and years and years ago, when it first started happening, about 12 years ago, I remember speaking to the Beast, Sam, your brother, and saying, I'm actually worried. And the Beast is the wrong person to say this to, because he went, oh my god, that's dead, that's dead bad.
What
you
we
need to
gonna
speak,
do?
Yeah, you need to speak to someone. And I
Quick now,
thought,
today.
yes, should have definitely said this to somebody else. And I'd not told anybody. I was so embarrassed by it. So trying to have some self-compassion, because this isn't something you are deliberately doing. It is a mental health condition that needs support. Sam, do you have any thoughts or tips? Sorry, tips.
I don't have any tips, because I don't know what it's like to live with this. It must be awful, but I can only echo what you said in getting help. I was just trying to Google then. I read a fictional book once that was really good, and this man lived in a caravan and he had OCD. I feel like he might have worked in a supermarket, but it really, it made me realize how debilitating it was, because he wasn't able to do anything. He had so many routines that he had to do before he could ever leave his caravan, and I just thought, wow, that must be so fucking hard. So yeah, get help.
Yeah,
Al?
I mean, that's it, isn't it? OCD needs therapy. It needs that support. If the serotonergic, like antidepressants, or hopefully soon psilocybin, if the trials are good, work, then great. But it is a disorder that really, really does need therapy, and it's really hard to spot as well. If you're a logical-minded person and your thoughts are telling you something is true, and you feel that that's true, but you kind of know that can't be right, it's very, very awkward and debilitating, uncomfortable. And it's okay. A friend of mine used to say to me, is that real? And I would say, no, that's not real. And they would say, are you sure? And I'd say, yeah, let's go through it. Is that likely to be connected? And they'd say, oh yeah, no, of course. And that was very difficult. And it would help in the short term, but long term, it was a case of therapy. And if you have ADHD and OCD, you absolutely need ADHD informed therapy. Check that, and check that they're meaningful when they go, oh yes, I know about that. Check that they mean it, because the shame and guilt of working with a therapist who then tells you off for not doing the thing you thought you were going to do, because we can't, right, is crippling, and you won't go back. And this is why so many of us say, oh, I hated CBT. Not all of us, not me, but loads of us do, because you've got to be ADHD informed. And so really, absolutely check that, I think. Oh, sorry, one last thing. Sobriety can throw if you have an alcohol problem and you have OCD or ADHD, sobriety can throw up those problems that you've been self-medicating for. So if you have sobriety and you used to have compulsions, watch for them coming back and go and talk to your doctor about it. That's a really big one. Inappropriate
useful?
thing.
I almost did an inappropriate ding. I think I whispered an inappropriate ding halfway through that as well.
Yeah.
It's been a relatively ding-free episode.
It has.
Which is, I think we can probably ding away now. Now we've got through the meat.
Is that what you were whispering before? I saw you whispering something and didn't know what it was.
It may have been a ding. Inappropriate ding. Anyway, that was episode, we think, 151 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we talked about ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. If you enjoyed this episode, unlikely the best bit was toward the middle when I walked out, then you can find more content by subscribing on Patreon. Visit the ADHDadults.uk to find out more. To get in touch, if you want to send us a letter, if you want to suggest a topic for an episode, you can get in touch via the forms there. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye all.
Trigger warning, klaxon, 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 big klaxon. Trigger warning, klaxon, 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 klaxon.